I never told my new partner that the hardware store we were standing in, the one she kept calling a cute little shop, was actually mine. I'd owned it for 19 years. I also hadn't mentioned the rental duplex on Maple Drive, or the lot out near Barrie that I'd been sitting on since my late wife passed. I let her believe I was just the weekend manager helping out my old friend. And as it turned out, that quiet little omission ended up being the smartest thing I'd done in years. My name is not important. What matters is that I'm 63 years old. I live outside of Guelph, Ontario, and about 14 months ago I made the kind of mistake that men my age make when they're lonely for too long. I got married again, too fast, to someone I'd known for less than 8 months. My first wife and I were together for 31 years. She passed from cancer 4 years ago, and I won't pretend it didn't hollow me out in ways I still don't fully understand. We'd build everything together. The store, the rental property, the savings, the life. She was the one who talked me into buying the Barrie lot when everyone else thought I was being foolish. She had good instincts, better than mine as it turned out. After she was gone, my daughter kept checking on me. She'd drive up from Hamilton on weekends, and we'd have dinner, and she'd ask how I was doing in that careful way. Children ask when they're worried, but don't want to say so. I always told her I was fine, and I was, mostly, but fine isn't the same as whole. I met my second wife at a curling club fundraiser in town. She was from Sudbury originally, recently relocated to the area, recently divorced, and she laughed at everything I said. That's the thing nobody warns you about after you've been grieving. When someone laughs at your jokes again, it feels like the sun coming out. You forget to be careful. Her name was Sandra. She had a son from her previous marriage, 22 years old, named Tyler. When she introduced us, he shook my hand and looked past my shoulder at the same time. I noticed it. I filed it away and then I forgave it because young men can be awkward about their mothers dating, and I thought it would get easier. It did not get easier. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We dated for about 7 months. She was warm and funny, and she seemed genuinely interested in my life. She asked about the store, and I told her I helped manage it for a friend, which was technically true, since I managed it myself. I don't know exactly why I held back that information. Part of it was something my daughter had said early on, when I first mentioned Sandra. She'd gone quiet for a moment on the phone, and then said, "Dad, just take your time. You don't have to show all your cards right away." She was 28 and wiser than me, apparently. So I took her advice without fully meaning to. I let Sandra see the ordinary version of my life, my old truck, my modest house on the edge of town. The Saturday mornings I spent at the store helping customers find the right drill bit or the right grade of sandpaper. She seemed to find it charming, the simplicity of it. She called me her salt-of-the-earth man. We got married in September. Small ceremony. Just family and close friends. My daughter stood beside me, smiling when she was supposed to smile, but she held my hand during the vows and squeezed it just once, tight, in a way that meant something she wasn't saying out loud. Sandra moved in with her son shortly after. Tyler took the spare room on the second floor, which had been my late wife's sewing room. I didn't say anything about that. I told myself it was just a room. We had been married for 51 hours when everything changed. It was a Sunday evening. I was in the kitchen making tea. Sandra came in and sat down at the table, and she had that look on her face. I didn't know it then, but I know it now. The look of someone who has decided it's time to move to the next phase of a plan. She folded her hands on the table like she was chairing a meeting, and she said, "We need to talk about our financial situation." I set down the kettle. "All right. Tyler and I have been thinking," she said, "and we feel like the living arrangement here isn't really sustainable long term. This house is fine, but it's in your name, and honestly, it's a bit far from where he needs to be for work. We were thinking maybe we could sell it and put the money towards something more central, something in both our names." I stood there for a moment. I want to be honest about what I felt. It wasn't just surprise. It was a particular kind of cold clarity, Like when the ground shifts under your feet and for 1 second you're weightless, and in that second you see everything very precisely. You've been thinking, I said. We both have. It makes sense. If we're going to be a family, we should build something together. Tyler had apparently been part of this conversation. Tyler, who I had known for 8 months, who had never once looked me in the eye at dinner, had been sitting in his mother's room making plans about my house. I didn't show what I was feeling. That's something I learned a long time ago in business. The moment you let someone see you rattled is the moment you lose the negotiation. I just nodded and said, "Let me think about it." She pressed a little, said they'd already looked at some listings, said there was a place in the West End of Guelph that was perfect for all three of us, and that the asking price was around 700,000, and that with what we'd get from selling my house and what she assumed I had in savings, we could probably manage the down payment. That word assumed landed somewhere in my chest and stayed there. "I'll think about it," I said again, and I went and had my tea in the living room alone. That night I sat in the dark for a long time. I thought about my first wife, about the years she and I had worked side by side, the decisions we'd made together slowly and carefully, the way she used to say that trust is built in small things before it's tested in big ones. We had 31 years of small things. I had 51 hours with Sandra. I called my daughter the next morning before Sandra and Tyler were awake. I told her everything. There was a long pause, and then she said very quietly, "Dad, I need you to listen to me. Do not move any money. Do not sign anything, and please talk to your lawyer this week." She didn't say "I told you so." She's never been that kind of person. But I heard it underneath, the way you hear things people love you. Enough not to say. I called my lawyer that Tuesday. His office is just off Stone Road, and I've used him for business matters for almost 15 years. I drove there in my old truck, told the receptionist it was urgent, and sat in his office and laid out everything that had happened over 51 hours of marriage. He listened with his hands flat on his desk, and when I finished he said, "You haven't co-signed anything? She's not on the deed to the house." "No," I said. "And the store, the rental property?" "Her name isn't on anything." He leaned back and said, "Good. Let's keep it that way." He walked me through what my rights were, what protections existed under Ontario family law, and what I needed to do to make sure my assets stayed properly separated. We talked about a postnuptial agreement, which I hadn't known was a thing until that day. He was careful and thorough, and I left there feeling less like I was falling. The harder conversation came a few days later, when Sandra brought it up again. She had a printout this time. Actual printed listings from a real estate website, with prices circled in pen. "I thought we could go see a few of these on Saturday," she said at breakfast. "I spoke to my lawyer," I said. The air in the kitchen changed. It's hard to describe, but if you've ever been in a room when someone's expression shifts in a way that reveals something they've been keeping behind their eyes, you'd recognize it immediately. Her face did something complicated in about 2 seconds. "Your lawyer," she repeated. "Yes, about protecting the assets I brought into this marriage. I'm your wife." "You are, and that's exactly why I want to make sure we do this carefully and correctly." Tyler walked in then, poured himself coffee, and stood against the counter. He looked at his mother, not at me. She gave a small shake of her head. I watched all of that and said nothing. Over the next week, Sandra's warmth went somewhere I couldn't find it. She was polite in the way that people are polite when they're angry and waiting. Tyler stopped joining us for dinner without explanation. The house felt like a waiting room. And then one evening, I came home from the store, my store, the one I'd owned for 19 years, and Sandra was sitting at the kitchen table again, and this time Tyler was sitting beside her. They both looked up when I came in. "We need to have a real conversation," Sandra said. Tyler looked at me, actually looked at me for maybe the third time since we'd met, and said, "This isn't working." I sat down, slowly. I took my jacket off and hung it on the back of the chair, and I sat down, because I wasn't going to have this conversation standing in my own doorway. "What isn't working?" I asked. Sandra started talking about how she felt like I didn't trust her, how a marriage without trust wasn't a real marriage, how she'd left her life in Sudbury and relocated for this and felt like I wasn't meeting her halfway. Her voice climbed a little as she went. Tyler nodded along like a metronome. I let her finish, and then I said, "Sandra, can I ask you something?" She stopped. "When you moved down here, before we got married, did you do a walkthrough of the property on Maple Drive?" She blinked. "What?" "The rental property. The duplex. Did you know about it before the wedding?" Her expression flickered. "No, what are you talking about?" "I own a duplex on Maple Drive. I've had tenants there for 6 years. I also own the hardware store on the main street where I've been working Saturdays. I don't manage it for a friend. I own it. I've owned it since 2005. I paused. "And there's a lot near Barrie I've been holding on to for about 3 years now." The kitchen was very quiet. "You?" Sandra started. "I didn't lie to you," I said. "I just didn't volunteer information to someone I'd known for 7 months, which, as it turns out, was the right call." Tyler pushed back from the table and stood up. He looked at his mother. Something was passing between them that I wasn't meant to see, and I saw all of it anyway. Sandra said, "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you're asking me to sell my home and pool my savings and purchase a property in both our names after 51 hours of marriage. And I think you deserve to know exactly what it is you were hoping to get access to." I won't dramatize what happened next. There was no screaming, no scene. Sandra's face went through several things quickly. Surprise, recalculation, something that looked almost like embarrassment. And then she stood up from the table and said she needed some air. Tyler gave me a long look on his way out of the kitchen. Not hostile exactly. Something harder to name. Like someone who had just realized the cards weren't what they'd assumed. The following weeks were the hardest. Not because of anything dramatic. The drama, in a way, was behind us. What was hard was the ordinary sadness of it. Watching a marriage you'd hoped for slowly reveal itself as something else. Sandra and I had a few more conversations, quieter ones, and somewhere in those conversations the shape of things became clear. She had arrived in this marriage expecting one version of my life and found another. She had made plans based on assumptions, and once those assumptions were corrected, the warmth I thought I'd found in her went somewhere I couldn't reach. She and Tyler were gone by November. They went back to Sudbury. I signed some papers and spoke to my lawyer a few more times, and then it was over in the way that things in Ontario take longer than you'd like, but do eventually become over. My daughter drove up the weekend after they left. She brought food, which is what she does when she doesn't know what else to do, and we sat at the kitchen table, the same table where all of it had happened, and we ate, and we didn't talk about Sandra very much. At the end of the evening, she said, "I'm sorry it went like that, Dad." I told her I was too, and I meant it. Not because I wished the marriage had worked out the way I'd imagined. I'd stopped imagining that fairly early on. But because there's a particular grief in realizing that the warmth you thought you'd found wasn't quite real, and that the loneliness you were trying to cure is still there, just differently shaped now. But here's what else is true. My house is still mine. The store is still mine. The duplex on Maple Drive, the lot near Barrie, all of it is still exactly where I left it, undisturbed. My first wife and I built those things with 31 years of early mornings and careful decisions and staying up late over spreadsheets and arguing about property taxes and trusting each other through the hard ones. No one is going to walk away with any of it in 8 months. My daughter called it luck. My lawyer called it caution. I've been thinking about it, and I think the honest word is grief, because it was only grief that made me careful. If I hadn't been so scared of being wrong again, so aware of all the ways things can fall apart without warning, I might have said yes to everything before the ink was dry. That's not a comfortable thing to admit, but it's true. It's a quiet January now in Guelph. I go to the store on Saturdays. My regular customers come in and we talk about the weather and the hockey and the right kind of caulking for a drafty window frame. My daughter comes up once a month. And we have dinner and she tells me about her life and I tell her about mine, and the table feels more like mine again than it did for a while. I'm not closed off. I want to be clear about that. I'm still the kind of person who can laugh at a curling club fundraiser and mean it, but I take my time now, and I keep some things to myself until someone has earned the right to know them. My first wife used to say that trust is a door you open slowly, one hinge at a time. She was right about a lot of things. I just wish I'd remembered that one sooner. I still think about that kitchen table sometimes. The way Sandra folded her hands on it like she was running a board meeting. The way Tyler sat beside her 2 weeks later, not quite looking at me, while the two of them waited to see what I would do. What strikes me now, looking back, isn't the anger. I don't have much of that left. What strikes me is how close I came to saying yes to everything before I understood what I was agreeing to. One signature. One conversation where I led with my heart instead of my head. That's all it would have taken. I think about my first wife a lot during moments like this. She was the one who taught me that real partnership is built in the ordinary, unglamorous decisions, the ones nobody sees. Choosing to be honest when it would have been easier not to. Choosing to slow down when everything in you wants to rush forward because you're lonely and the warmth feels good and you've forgotten what it felt like to have someone on your side. She and I had 31 years of those small choices. They added up to something solid, something that held stilled. Sandra and I had 51 hours, and in those 51 hours, she showed me exactly who she was. Not because she was uniquely dishonest, but because she hadn't built the patience that honesty requires. Neither had I, in a different way. I moved too fast. I let loneliness do the steering. And the only thing that saved me was a habit of caution I hadn't fully chosen. I'd inherited it from grief. That's the part I find hardest to sit with. It wasn't wisdom that protected me. It was loss. It was the fear of being wrong again that made me quiet about my assets, that made me listen to my daughter when she told me to take my time, that made me pick up the phone and call my lawyer before I signed a single thing. I stumbled into doing the right thing for the right reasons, but I stumbled. I'd rather have been deliberate about it. I'd rather have had the clarity to say, early on, I am a person who built something real over many decades, and I owe it to myself and to the memory of the woman who built it with me to protect it carefully, not out of suspicion, not out of coldness, but out of self-respect, out of the understanding that integrity isn't just about how you treat others. It's also about how honestly you see your own situation and how much courage it takes to act on what you see, even when acting is uncomfortable. My daughter's that kind of clarity. She's always had it. She was 28 years old and she saw Sandra more clearly in one phone call than I had in 7 months. I don't say that to embarrass myself. I say it because I think it's worth naming. Clear thinking is a skill. It takes practice. It takes the willingness to ask hard questions and sit with uncomfortable answers instead of smoothing them over because you want things to work out. My lawyer used to say that the most expensive conversations are the ones people avoid having early. He's right. Sandra and I never talked about money before the wedding. Never talked about Tyler's living situation or what building something together actually meant in practical terms. I assumed goodwill. She assumed access. We were both working from incomplete information and calling it love. I'm 63 years old, on the eve alone in Guelph. And on Saturday mornings I open the store and talk to my regulars about weather and hockey and the right caulking for a drafty window. It is a quiet life. Some days it feels too quiet, but it is mine, genuinely, completely mine. And I earned it, and I know its value. That's not nothing. That's actually quite a lot. My first wife used to say that trust is a door you open slowly, one hinge at a time. I'm learning, a little late, to really mean it when I say she was right.